Mark and Lisa had been married for 6 years, but for a while now. Their relationship was strained due to one huge challenge. They'd been desperately trying to have a baby, with no luck month after month, year after year. It was the same story, visits to different doctor's tests that showed nothing conclusive, endless vitamins, medications, you name it. Lisa became hyper-focused on getting pregnant. It took over her life, and meanwhile Mark was getting fed up with all the clinic appointments. Instead of talking about things they used to love, all she wanted to discuss was fertility and health. Whenever he tried to change the subject, she'd get irritated. Tension was building between them. One day, Mark finally put his foot down. "I'm not going back to another one of these doctors," he said. "This is pointless. Our tests are fine. This should happen naturally." Lisa, already on edge, took that as a personal attack and insulted him. In return, they spent the rest of that evening in silence. The following month became the worst in their history as a couple. They only spoke about household matters, and Lisa walked around bitter and distant. Every little thing Mark did seemed to annoy her. To escape the turmoil at home, Lisa started spending more time with her girlfriends. One afternoon, she got to the cafe where they planned to meet about half an hour early. She ordered coffee, took a seat by the window, and flipped through a magazine she'd just bought. That's when she noticed a tall, confident man stride into the cafe. Dave, a dark-haired professional in a sharp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He placed his order at the counter, sat at the table next to hers, and the two ended up chatting. Lisa's friends were running late, so she and Dave wound up talking for close to an hour before he had to dash off for a business appointment. They exchanged numbers over the next couple of weeks. Lisa didn't seem quite as miserable at home, but she was still drifting from Mark. She'd answer his questions with curt replies, then leave for girl nights. Even more often, Mark had no idea that Lisa's personal life had taken a dramatic turn. Eventually, Mark realized Lisa wasn't going to be the one to apologize for that fight. Wanting to patch things up, he decided to extend an olive branch. "Lisa, eaget at this is super important to you. You want a child too. I'm sorry for my harsh words. Let's go away together. Just the two of us, maybe hit the beach. I've been looking at some vacation packages." She was surprised he was the first to apologize, and honestly moved by his suggestion to finally take some time off together. She apologized too, agreeing it was worth giving their marriage another shot. After all, they'd been through a lot together. Why throw it away over one stupid argument? In the days that followed, Mark became extra sweet. He showered her with affection, and the spark between them reignited. Lisa thought about Dave during that time, how she'd gotten involved with him partly out of hurt and resentment. She and Dave hadn't met up in a while because she kept dodging his invites, and now she realized she needed to cut that off for good. A few days before the planned trip with her husband, Lisa agreed to meet Dave for coffee. He suggested their favorite hotel spot, but she said a simple cafe would do. After some small talk, she blurted out that she wanted to end things. Dave stared, clearly taken aback. "Where's this coming from?" he asked calmly. "I'm sorry," Lisa said. "Our relationship was a mistake. I love my husband." Dave had always known she was married, but hearing she was recommitting to Mark was news. For weeks, Lisa had implied she was leaving her husband. Dave had grown attached and wasn't used to people just discarding him like that. "So that's how it is," he said, anger flaring in his eyes. "I'm just a toy you play with for a month and then toss aside." "Dave, please understand, I was confused when we first met. I truly believed I was done with Mark." Lisa's voice trailed off. He clearly didn't like what he was hearing. He started to raise his voice and stopped himself, deciding it wasn't worth it. He said goodbye and through clenched teeth wished her a pleasant trip with her husband. Lisa felt incredibly uneasy about that confrontation, but told herself it was over. She blocked his number, deleted their texts, figuring he didn't know her address and was unlikely to do anything drastic. Despite being hot-headed once that was behind her, Lisa set her mind on the long-awaited vacation with Mark for 2 whole weeks. They relaxed at the beach even before they got married. They'd never enjoyed this kind of carefree time together. They spent the days lying in the sun, strolling through the local town, sampling restaurants and excursions, and spending romantic evenings in their room. It felt like a second honeymoon. The tension between them all but vanished. Revived and happy, they got back home and settled into their routines. One day, Lisa felt strangely off, like something was up with her body. Realizing she was overdue, she took a pregnancy test on her lunch break at work. When she saw 2 pink lines, tears filled her eyes. Finally, after all the struggle, she was pregnant. She could barely wait to share the good news with Mark the moment she finished. Work she hopped in a taxi and hurried home, picturing how thrilled he'd be, how he'd hug and kiss her in excitement. But stepping into their apartment, she was met with a completely different scene. Mark was in the kitchen, hunched over, his phone on the table. He had his head in his hands, totally still. When Lisa walked in, he looked up with an intense stare. "Sit down," he said sharply, pointing to the chair next to him. Lisa's stomach sank. She obeyed. Noticing he'd put his phone on the table, displaying a photograph, her heart practically plummeted through the floor. She recognized the man in the photo. Dave, smiling against the backdrop of a bed, and on that bed, stark naked, was Lisa herself, apparently asleep. Or unaware, she hadn't realized Dave had taken any pictures like that. Tears streamed down her face as her body went numb. "Got anything to explain?" Mark asked it in a low, steely voice. "Mark, no, it's not what it looks like. It's some kind of mistake," she mumbled in panic. "Mistake, huh? Dave sent this to me today, graciously informing me your fling's been going on for more than a month and that you plan to leave me." Lisa sobbed, insisting it was all lies, and in a desperate move, confessed she was pregnant with his baby, certain that now everything would be okay. "Be sure to give my congratulations to Dave," Mark said icily. "Now get out of my home," she kept pleading for forgiveness, which only fueled his anger. Soon enough, he was tossing her clothes into a suitcase, forcing her to leave. Next came the divorce. Mark simply couldn't imagine trusting a woman who'd betrayed him, cheated because she was upset, and then tried to bury it. Life in a marriage can be tough, and sometimes things don't go smoothly. But if your first solution is to run into someone else's arms, well, that's a choice with consequences. Betrayals rarely stay secret forever, and sooner or later there's a heavy price to pay.